Hello and welcome to session 2 of the Safe and Sound Challenge 2024.
Woo!
um, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're spending some time with us, learning about how to keep your children, the children in your community, safe. And that is our goal with this challenge, and just to educate and bring some awareness. And there's a lot. Things keep evolving and changing. So it's a continuous conversation with the adults and with the children. So
Yeah, last we
that's
did
why we're here
not
today.
know were going to be things we would even talk about when we first
Yes.
started doing this challenge, if you can believe that.
For sure.
So,
Well, we do have a special guest. Like last night, we had Robbie Smith with One More Child. Today, we have Taylor Bowman with One More Child, and she's actually a friend of mine from church. And so I was super excited that we got to connect and do this training together. Here's a little bit about Taylor. She is an anti-trafficking advocate with a history working around legal and family systems. She graduated with her Bachelor's of Science in Psychology from Johnson University and has worked diligently to strengthen families and communities in Central Florida. Her favorite part of the work she does is connecting personally with clients and watching her clients reach healthy goals on their journey to holistic well-being. Welcome, Taylor. I'm so
Hi,
glad you
thank
could be with us
you.
today.
Yes, happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
And I know, like, you've had kind of a busy few days and you were out of the office, so I'm so glad you're able to join us this afternoon. And
Yes, it's been so fun.
I will. Did you want to present today
Yeah,
from your side?
absolutely.
Okay.
I know that Robbie presented yesterday.
Yes.
I was kind of gonna go over basically the same things, and if you guys had any questions or wanted to expand on anything further, I was able to watch a little bit of what happened yesterday. It seemed like it went really well. So I'm excited to be here, and I will try not to repeat anything too much.
Okay. I think, like, today, I know I'm going to talk a bit about this exploitation aspects. If you want to talk a little bit more about internet safety and what you're seeing, maybe in your work,
Yeah, definitely. Do you
like
want me to
maybe
pull up
more
the
like
PowerPoint, or do you want me to do
if
just
you
kind
want,
of
that's
be a
up
little
to
bit more
you. That's up to
holistically?
you. I like holistic presentations. Obviously, no personal information. We're not going to share anybody's personal information, but
Okay.
I think stories really connect with people, and it helps them like kind of identify some things with their own kids, maybe that.
Yeah.
So I think that would be good. And if you have some PowerPoint stuff you want to go along with that, that'd be
Mm-hmm.
good. So I'm going to put it in your
Definitely.
hands.
Yeah, well, we can definitely kind of talk about internet safety. I It's something I'm really passionate about. My husband works in IT, so together, both of us are having a lot of conversations about internet safety. And if you keep up with current events and the laws that are being passed, I think there's been much more recognition in our government about the impact that the internet is having, especially in these more darker scenarios. So it's always nice to see as things develop, people really fighting in our legislature for increased internet safety.
Yeah, that is
Um,
great. And if you have some specifics to share, that would be good too. I'm going to go ahead and flip out and hand it over to you, Taylor. You good? You ready?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, well, hi. My name's Taylor. Like Dixie said, I'm an anti-trafficking advocate with One More Child. Um, we work a lot with either minor or young adult victims of trafficking, or just sexual exploitation. Sometimes it's difficult to recognize where those two lines intersect. It can be a little bit blurry to know when things do cross the boundary between assault and exploitation into trafficking. But we try to service everybody wherever they're at. And that is one thing I really do love about our organization and our work. On the topic of internet safety specifically, that is something I am, like I said, very, very passionate about. I believe Robbie did a fantastic job. If you didn't catch the live stream yesterday, I would encourage you to go back and watch it, of going over the PowerPoint with some specifics on internet safety and the data that we're seeing. A lot of the data with internet safety is very new. That is one thing whenever you are looking up statistics, whether to educate yourself or to protect your household and any children under your care. The statistics are changing constantly, and we're trying to use the newest information we can. So if you are doing research on your own, I would definitely encourage you to find statistics that are newer, as new as possible, and also be aware of the limitations of research in the realm of internet safety. Generally, especially since COVID, we're seeing rises in just the online exploitation of both minors and adults. We're seeing definitely a big rise in sexually explicit content being sold online, and that being a new method of income for some people, especially with the rise of OnlyFans and of websites similar. And now there is in politics a big push for, should sexually explicit sites be allowed? Should they be banned? So conversations are definitely being had, and it's important to be responsible with the research that we are finding, and just recognize that the longer the internet is around, the faster the technology is going to grow and develop, especially now with things like AI. And as that technology develops past the point where we have researched and we do have good boundaries, it will, I'm very confident we'll see a lot of change. I mean, we have already, especially since COVID, but in the upcoming generations, a lot of change on what safe keeping on the internet looks like. I will talk a little bit briefly about kind of from the caregiver standpoint. In my background, I did a lot with families and with parents, just educating about how to manage behaviors in the home, and behaviors around internet is definitely the biggest thing that parents would come to me with concerns about. It is very hard to manage around the internet, especially because many parents did not grow up, like we're having the first generation really of parents who did grow up around the internet, and the internet they grew up with looks very, very different from the internet that their children are interacting with, and that their children are quickly learning to use and normally surpassing their parents' knowledge of how to use. So I'll definitely dive in a little bit more to that specifically. And if anyone has any questions or wants to expand on anything, I love to expand on questions. I think they're so great and valuable. And I will kind of end with just how we've seen in the work I do with clients, the internet affect clients, and how when we do interact either individually with the internet or with people who have been exploited on the internet, just the things we want to be aware of and the sensitivities we want to remember when interacting with them. So with that being said, Robbie yesterday shared some really great information about like teenage nude statistics, dating and social media, and what that's looking like right now. And I really want to, one of the biggest things that we see in our work, and that I see a lot with my clients, is that children are reaching out to these websites or finding themselves on websites with either content that's explicitly targeted to being explicit, or advertisements that are explicit much younger than I think parents realize. And so right from the get-go, the biggest encouragement I have for clients from that I'm working with, and for any parent who is open to the conversation, is to have very intentional conversations with your child or with the people in your life about sex and sexual anatomy and what is and is not appropriate younger than really as soon as possible, but younger than you may think. Do not wait until puberty. Normally, children who are going through puberty in that like late childhood, early adolescent stage have already seen plenty of information online that we don't necessarily want them to be getting educated by. And so, as parents and as caregivers, that is a really big responsibility that we have, just to educate and inform about what those things are supposed to look like. I know those conversations can be really difficult, especially if your child has had internet access and they come to you asking, Mom, I saw this video, or Dad, I saw this video, and this is what was happening in there. Like, it can be hard enough talking with your spouse or your partner about some of these topics, let alone a child that you want to protect and that you don't like imagining interacting with these topics. But the more normalized you can make these conversations with you as the parent or caregiver, the easier your child will be in trusting you with this information that they really don't understand. So be prepared for these heavy conversations, be proactive in having them young. And then another thing alongside of that I think parents now in this day and age need to be proactive in the same capacity with is educating themselves about how internet should run in the home. Like I said, my husband works in IT, so I get a really front page view of exactly how much goes into protecting a home with technology. And as someone who grew up with, touch screens and more internet availability than my parents, I can tell you how easy it is as children to work around loopholes that parents are really trying hard to protect you from. So parents, my encouragement would be know not just your parental controls, because most devices will have parental controls. And while it is great to know them very well, understand the limits of what the parental controls are able to do. For example, you can block your child's device from downloading an app like Snapchat or like Instagram, things like that. However, as long as that child has access to a web browser, anything with Google Chrome or Safari or any web browser, and that can be a computer, it can be a phone, it can be a Nintendo Switch. They have access to the internet. Most gaming devices do. Anything that can access the internet, that child can go on and go to the website for these social media and still engage in these websites, because that's what they are. The application is just a quick way of accessing it on your phone. And then that's just one example of a loophole that most children will know about, but a lot of adults may not. And so really, really inform yourself on parental controls, what their limitations are, and how you can protect beyond the parental controls. Apple specifically has built-in parental controls, whereas most Android devices, they have some built-in, but you might need to also go into Google Play Store and get the Google Family Link application, which will go a little bit further to protect your devices. I don't want to misquote anything, and I don't have the statistic in front of me. And so being a good manager of information, I don't want to throw a name out there, but I believe that the screen time recommendation for children is still to really limit and not involve kids in screen time until they're about 2, which is vastly different than a lot of what's happening in a lot of households. And so being aware that while technology can be an incredibly beneficial tool when used well, it's also still a new tool. And we're still, as a society, learning about the effects on not even just the explicit content that children can access, but the effects on their mental health and the effects on their um, ability to process information is still very new. And so I also encourage parents as much as you can to regulate screen time in the home. And a second encouragement that I think is equally, if not more important, is to be aware as a parent or as a caregiver, or even if there's not a child in your care, as a adult who is in a circle of influence somewhere, whether that's at church, at school, within your family, that the behavior you model with technology to your children is going to be the behavior that your children are most likely to follow. So if they see that, I'm just saying as mom, because in my head, I'm thinking of myself as mom. If they see as mom that it's important to you to post all major milestones on social media, that your phone is present at all meals, that you have to have it near at all times, that is likely going to be the behavior that they're going to mimic. Just because that is what to them is normal management of technology within the home and by an adult. And so I just encourage parents and caregivers and really everybody to be mindful that children are like sponges and they will watch you in the way that you're interacting with technology very closely. And if that's a very close relationship that you have with technology, don't be surprised if their relationship with technology is likewise very tuned in and very hard to detach from. I know that internet safety can be a hard topic to process in the home. And so another really key component I would encourage parents with is to be mindful of how you're having conversations about internet safety with your children. Children feel most able, and I mean, people in general, I know this is true for myself, feel most able to open up to someone when they don't fear that their voices are not going to be heard. That's a big thing that we see just in the anti-trafficking world as a whole. Having choice and having the ability to make our opinions heard and our voices heard is just very important as a human functioning in society. And that is very true for children, especially for adolescents who are figuring out their own identity in the world, because that usually is the biggest developmental milestone for teenagers, as any parent who's raised a teenager knows. And so when you're approaching your children to have conversations about internet safety, at one resource that I've interacted with, I believe I found them through Thorn, which is a fantastic advocacy website, but it was by a psychologist, and she shared the importance of having sideways conversations with children, which means when we bring up ideas on like internet safety or sexuality, instead of lecturing and these topics becoming always something that kids are expected to just be told, this is what you do and I'm not going to listen to your opinion, having conversations that are focused more on expanding the conversation, if that makes sense. So an example, a real life example of this would be if your 11-year-old comes to you and they're saying, hey mom, I saw this post on Instagram and I'm confused on what this means. And it's something that is a little bit alarming to you that you don't want them to be looking at, something like sexually explicit or something violent. A really quick way to shut down a conversation is to be like, give me your phone, you're getting off Instagram. This is why we don't, allow you to do this in the house, and we will not revisit this conversation in the future. But a sideways conversation may approach it more as, okay, what bothered, thank you for bringing this to me. What bothered you about this post? Or what kind of questions do you have about this post? And it just really engages the child in thinking through for themselves what material they're interacting with. And it also helps you as a parent understand from their perspective how they're perceiving the information. One fantastic question I love about internet safety with children is, how would you protect your sibling if they were online and you wanted to make sure that nothing bad happened to them? Because it really gets them to think outside of themselves, and to process, like, okay, if I wanted to protect someone I love and I care about, how would I do that? Well, online. When things come up in the news, because children are very smart, if there is a story in the news of some type of unfortunate exploitation online, don't shy away from having a conversation with your child that looks like, hey, how would you, how would you have responded? Would you have told someone? If not, why? If so, who would you have told and why would you have told them? Just really getting in deep with them. All of that to say, though, sometimes these conversations can be really difficult. And so don't be scared as a parent to exercise your authority and speak well about what it looks like to take items, like to take, do physical searches of like your children's phones and things. Don't be afraid to have a boundary of, at nighttime past 10, there's no reason to have your phone in your room past a certain age. And of course, there are very valid concerns that I've heard raised from teenagers who've grown into adults who had boundaries like that of, well, your child needs some space to be private. And that's absolutely true. We do want to make sure we are respecting our child's choice in having some version of privacy. But I do want to emphasize that they can have other spaces of privacy that are not online, because ultimately anything online is not private. As private as we want to make it, it will always be able to be found by someone. As anonymous as you want to make your profile online, an IP address, which is just the internet, like it's just like a physical address. It is the address from the Wi-Fi that you're using to access internet. That can be found by a lot of people. They don't even have to be IT professionals in order to know how to locate IP addresses. And so really emphasizing to your child, if that's one of the arguments, that it's absolutely okay for them to have privacy, and encourage them, like, here's a journal for your private thoughts. And here's non-online ways to engage with technology and have privacy doing it. Like if they like to draw, here's an application on your iPad or on your phone where you can draw and no one's going to see these. It's not connected to any network. But being able to emphasize that anything happening online is absolutely your business as a parent, in order to protect them. And then lastly, like I said, I just kind of want to talk about what we're seeing, and if you do have concerns about yourself or others engaging in exploitation online, how to kind of address that head on. Normally when I'm working with clients and there is some type of online exploitation, is happening for teenagers, young teenagers. They are at a really vulnerable point in their lives, as we all go through as teenagers, especially teenage girls or teenagers who are in groups that feel excluded or that are targeted for bullying. So like the LGBTQ population, minorities in whatever community they're living in. So minorities look different for every community, but any type of minority, anyone struggling with their self-esteem is most apt to online exploitation by any means. And it's normally children whose parents, for whatever reason, are unable or unprepared to have some of these conversations or to set up some of these boundaries. I do want to emphasize that in no way, when a child is exploited online or when a child is interacting with content online that they shouldn't be, that it is always or that it is the parent's fault somehow. A lot of the parents that I'm interacting with are living extraordinarily busy lives. And they grew up in a time where these conversations and thinking about these things was not a necessity. It was not something that was listed out in their classes before they had children. And it was not something that was ever really brought up to them. And so there are a lot of reasons why a parent or a caregiver may not be able to have these conversations with children. And so I do really want to emphasize that just as it's not the child's fault, it oftentimes we need to be sensitive that it's really rare that the parent was ever intending for something like this to happen for their child, which is also why it's important that we, just as a society, emphasize the need for conversations about technology, most likely within couples, or if someone's trying to get pregnant or to adopt or have a child in any capacity, they need to be educated about this prior to the child ever coming into their home. But anyways, the child normally is at a vulnerable spot in life, and they're often contacted by people that they don't know, which sounds, if it was like an in-person interaction, that sounds much scarier than it is online. There are a lot of what being online is like for a child these days, and really for anyone, is that we are opening ourselves up to people we may not know. And so, think about like for a business or for a nonprofit such as yourself, like trying to educate people, or anyone trying to build like an influence, like a following online. Of course, it comes with an understanding of people that I don't know are going to be looking at and interacting with my content. And a lot of children are motivated by online following. Me and my husband use an analogy that being online is like having an entirely separate identity than your in-person identity. It's an entirely separate world that you're able to create for yourself. And that means different friends. It means a different perception of who you are to these people that you're interacting with. And so in that realm of being online and gaming, especially for gamers, you will interact with people and you will have the ability at your fingertips to talk with people that you don't know. And so unless we are educating our children well on the dangers of that, it's not something that's going to immediately raise a red flag in their brains. And so once someone with nefarious intent does make contact, it is very easy to love bomb and to feed into that that insecurity that so many of us deal with. Who wouldn't want to hear lavish compliments from someone? Who wouldn't want to have their emotional needs met by someone? That is something we all crave as humans. And so that is usually what we're seeing, is that this person who went online at a young age or at a vulnerable point is having all of their insecurities and their emotional needs met, and they are now unable to detach from their phone. They don't want to detach from their phone or whatever way they're interacting with this person. There is not a logical reason to, because they are getting something from this person, from this online relationship that they aren't getting in person, with their in-person identity and their in-person community, which is another reason why it's important, as a community member, that we all engage with each other and see the needs of our unmet or our vulnerable populations, because they are so at risk for this type of exploitation. After that happens, typically there is the coercion into sending either explicit content, usually under the ruse of this is what happens in a relationship. Like, I'm providing you I'm meeting your emotional needs. You should meet my emotional needs. And this is what they look like. And I it's hard to have a positive outlook on that getting better until our culture shifts away from that being a normal part of what relationships look like, especially for teenagers. It's very, until we're able to have open conversations with our teens and with our children about sexuality and protecting ourselves and the um, dangers of the hypersexualization culture, which is so prevalent. It's all around us. It's in the media we consume. It's in the games our children are playing. And so we're able to kind of address that head on. It's going to be really difficult to change that trajectory for most teenagers. But that's why we can kind of start those conversations and changing that stereotype within our own home. Once exploitation online has happened, it can be very hard to escape that cycle of exploitation. I see a lot of people who, once they've identified that a piece of them, they're the person that they are sexually is valuable to others, especially if they're coming from poverty or having their tangible needs unmet. It is so easy, if not sometimes very encouraged, to engage in selling sexual content online, especially on websites like OnlyFans. And there can be this desensitization of what that looks like for people. So I've seen teenagers be encouraged, like, oh, just wait until you're 18 and you can sell, feet pics. Like, you're not selling anything explicit, but you can make money off of other people's fantasies, whatever that looks like. And it's once you've started identifying that your body is a commodity and that not only are people willing to pay for it, but people are willing to pay enough for it that you can support yourself and a family doing very not minimal work, because emotionally it is very difficult work. But by doing something where you don't have to leave the comfort of your home, you're not dealing with employers or other people, it's something you're able to kind of self-regulate. That cycle is really hard to get out of. And once you have, even outside of the selling, once you've identified, I always tell parents, once their children have tapped into those really strong hormones that come with sexual gratification, it is so, so hard, even against the child's best wishes, to turn off their hormones and their biology and to try not to engage further in sexual acts that that help them reach that point. I've worked with people who were exploited online, and that is one of the deepest sources of their of emotional trauma and difficulty and hardship that they have had up to this point in life. And because that also, and this is why it's so important to listen to survivors and to hear the nuances of their situations, because that also activated for them very young a really powerful reward center in their brain. It's very hard to walk away from that and to not continue to seek out relationships that will fulfill that need. And if you are seeking it out, or if someone is seeking that out, it is hard online to manage and to safely discern who has your best interest at heart with that. So that's normally what we're seeing take place. And that's also why we want to instill in teenagers and in young adults, and really in everybody, an important sense of self-worth, that your worth and the value of your body and the importance of your safety is never something that is below a minimum standard. You are always, always, always capable of much more than you think, and that you are, just from being a person, endowed to very specific rights. And one of those rights is the right to protect yourself and the right to not be taken advantage of. That is a very basic human right that we all have. And so when we're interacting with someone and we've identified, or we can identify, I think they're feeling really vulnerable in this area. I think this is a big area of insecurity for them, even if it is an area that we might have personal conviction or experiences not aligning with. Any source of insecurity and any source of feeling like that you as a person and that your personal identity is insignificant or lacking in any way, is a open door for someone to come in and attempt to distort what your worth truly is and looks like. So I would encourage anyone, parents, caregivers, friends, family, whoever, whatever your role is in your physical community surrounding you, you play a vital role in the worth and the ability of others to understand their worth. Any encouragement that you send to others, any uplifting that you do, any help that you do, especially tangibly, to those who are not able to meet their needs at that given point in time. And help doesn't always look like giving them a physical meal, but it means like, hey, I've noticed that it's been really difficult this past couple weeks to get groceries. How can we together solve this problem long term for you, so that you are capable of doing this and you know how to solve this problem in the future? That is invaluable to helping protect against any type of exploitation, but particularly online exploitation. If you, I think Robbie touched on this yesterday, but if you do feel as if you or someone that you love has been exploited online, be aware of the laws on reporting that. If it's a minor, always call DCF. DCF might encourage you to make a additional report to law enforcement. I do want to encourage, because I see this a lot, it is easy for, as easy as it is for exploiters online to identify their victims, it is equally as hard for law enforcement to find and to adequately prosecute to what we believe justice should be these people committing these atrocities. Normally, these are people who have put up safeguards against themselves very well. And law enforcement is always looking at, there's a lot going on. Like, just being honest, as someone who works around the field and who interacts with police and detectives, they are doing, especially the detectives who would be responding to cases like these, they have very high workloads, and there can be very difficult barriers to cross, especially because these perpetrators are normally in different states. They're normally using software to change their IP address so that they're not trackable. They are normally working with several others to try to keep up this facade, because as emotionally impactful as it is to one victim, it's very unfortunate, but it's normally not this perpetrator's first. They are usually leaving a web of exploitation, and that can be very hard to track. I see, Dixie, that you asked, like, what do we need to do to make sure law enforcement has what they need? That's a really great question. And it looks like a lot of recording, a lot of very strong evidence, which is normally what we would need anyways in legal systems. Basically, how it would work is when something is brought to the detective's attention, they have to be able to build a case and show, yes, these specific laws were broken. And that's when they would send it to a state attorney to start like prosecuting and pulling together that information. So they need to make sure, like, without reasonable doubt. And I know that usually is also proven in court, but they are really looking to make sure like we have a solid case. And so as parents, like, screenshots, as much information as you can pull from your conversations or your child's conversations with this person about any type of identifying factors of this person. So if they've mentioned, where they live, they usually won't. They're usually very sneaky and slippery, and that can be why it's so frustrating. Cooperation with law enforcement is really important. So they might take your phone, or they might take your child's phone, and they have to keep that in evidence until the case is closed. And so that could look like months, it could look like years. And so making sure you understand that they need that, then they will have cybersecurity, like forensic teams combing through that. But they will want your cooperation. And then another thing I really like to tell clients or caregivers of people who've been exploited online is that you are your best advocate. Sometimes it can be really frustrating to deal with law enforcement because they are so busy. The same thing with attorneys. They are managing very, very high caseloads, especially state attorneys or public defenders. And so it's not that they're trying to exclude you. It's that when they're looking at their work week, their priorities of what to, who to call, what to do, what to work on are normally not including to reach out consistently for updates. They may be relying on court systems to send you letters. They may be relying on, oh, I thought, this detective was going to reach out to you. So whenever you report something and you get the information of what detective's taking the case, please feel empowered and feel free to, because it is your right to call up and ask, hey, I just want the status on my case. What else are we looking for? What other evidence do you need? Is there anything else I can do to assist? Just be ready to ask those questions. And then this is really difficult encouragement, but it is something we see a lot. These cases can take a very long time and often will take several victims coming forward and reporting their experiences over spans of time to adequately prosecute. And so a lot of what I find myself doing in these cases is sitting very intentionally in the pain and in the hurt that happens when you or the person that you love has come forward and said, I was exploited online and I have all the evidence, and I have now changes in my brain and changes in my emotions and in my mental health that has stemmed from this awful, horrific event. And I reported it, and there's nothing else they can do. That's a really hard reality to live in, that not only that you are left to pick up and heal the pieces of what has happened, but that this person who very maliciously did this and then has likely discarded, that's a hard feeling too, is you've built this emotional bond and now they're nowhere to be found. So you feel very discarded, and it's hard to recognize and live with the reality that not only are you left to deal with those emotions, but that they're likely doing that to other people. And that, especially if you met them online and you don't know them in person and you don't know where they live, there's very limited ways you will ever know if justice was brought. And so it feels like, and what I've kind of sat with people through is this feeling of, like, you read a book and or you're watching a movie and you get to the point where the conflict like erupts and you're left with these really hard feelings, and there's no resolution, there's no ending, there's no ability to see when things are going to get better, whatever better looks like for you. And so just being aware of how much time that's going to take, being aware that it's normal to desperately want justice and to be very frustrated with the systems that that perpetrator is exploiting in order to stay protected. And that as much as you want justice for others, it is so, so important. And the thing that the perpetrator would hate the most is to see you get justice emotionally and mentally for yourself. The more, like I was talking about earlier, insecurity is a breeding ground for this type of exploitation. So the stronger that you are and you're able to become either after or before encountering something like this, the more protected you are. And that is the most frustrating thing for a perpetrator, whether it's in person or online exploitation. When they are losing control of you in the situation, that's when they get the meanest and the loudest and the most aggressive, because that is the one thing that they have to have in order to continue to exploit the situation. And so that's why a lot of what I do, especially with clients who may not have hit that trafficking mark, or like that blurry in between of I'm not necessarily sure what's happened to me, or what is going on, or what next steps are. We can process all of those emotions, absolutely. But I want them to be able to, and I want this for everybody, recognize the amount of control they have in their life, and it's limitless. Like, you are the only person who can control the actions that you're doing throughout the day. And even though thoughts can be intrusive, and absolutely we can address that, what's happening in your body and in your mind is what you can manage in these situations and in the emotional, in the aftermath of these situations. And so my last encouragement, and then I'll kind of toss it back over to you, Dixie, is just wherever you are in this scenario, if you're the person who's experienced some type of exploitation, or you're thinking, you know what, I had a scenario and I'm maybe realizing that there were some red flags present, and that I need to open up to someone about this, or you're the parent who either has had to have these conversations with your children, or now you're thinking very seriously about having these conversations, or you're just someone who is now very concerned about the people you're around. All of us play a part in helping to end cycles of this type of exploitation and to prevent further exploitation in our homes and in our online presence and in our presence in our community. All of these things go together to create culture. We use the word culture in a pretty specific way, and it can have a lot of connotations for people, but culture is any time people are together. There's cultures in workplaces, there are cultures in specific churches, there are cultures in homes. It's just the rules and the expectations and the stereotypes we have when we are together as people. And so you play a valuable role in creating the culture of the areas around you. And so I would encourage you to educate yourself, to educate your children and any children that you may interact with, to be bold in having difficult conversations, because the same, personal insecurities that that perpetrators can exploit is the same type of metally gray area of not speaking enough about it that they can exploit in homes where sex isn't a conversation, and in cultures where you're going to be shamed if you come forward about experiences you've had in this area. And so be bold in addressing these things. Be bold in your family and in your community about making sure people know and that you are aware of your worth and of your innate ability to have control over your situation. And if you are feeling out of control, or if you're feeling that something happened in the past that's not adding up, or ready to process some things that you would like to strengthen, or things that you would like to just bring life for the first time, please reach out to help know what to do. If you think it's exploitation, the National Human Trafficking Hotline is a fantastic resource to reach out to. You do not
Hey Taylor,
need to go there and don't call with this
can you hear
expectation
me?
of you have to be a
Hey
fair
Taylor.
victim. Call the expectation there to help. Yeah, and yeah, that's kind of all what I got.
That was so good, so good. The audio got a little weird at the end there, so that's why I jumped on, but that was so powerful. I just thought, like, you went over so many key points, and what kept kind of jumping out of me was just the importance of being open and having open conversations with your kids and the kids in your life. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the mom or dad. You can be aunt, uncle, you can be grandparents, you can just be like youth workers, teachers, having open conversations. They can still be appropriate, age appropriate, but having the open conversations that, what did you call them? Sideways conversations, which are expansive, which should always let the kids come to their own natural conclusions, and usually they're right on. Usually they have a good sense of what's right and wrong, and if they make these decisions for themselves, they feel even more empowered. They feel like a stronger sense of their own worth and identity instead of just listening to what mom and dad say. So I thought that was really good. Just building up their own identity, their own worth. It's so valuable. Thank you. Zona, did you have any questions or
I'm
comments?
sorry, I'm getting an echo, so I'm hearing what you're saying twice. And then yeah, I it makes no sense, but yes. So what I could hear was really powerful, and I think I'll definitely go back and watch again just because my my internet had frozen. So a lot of the video I didn't get to see, but I'm sure I'll be able to see it um later. But I do apologize because um yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do to fix that, but I do know that, like you were mentioning, like the sideways conversations, like ways that you can build confidence in your kids is really letting them tell you the things that they know, and that that confidence goes a long way uh, in ensuring a lot of different things, not just um, that they're less likely to be trafficked or exploited, and that's a really powerful step that you can take that seems way less scary than some of the other things that sometimes we're like, well, I have to be an IT person, or I have to figure out all this stuff, and it's like, or you can have solid conversations with your kids and help them deduct what is okay for them, and have those conversations where they tell you, like, hey, I didn't really like this, or I'm going to set a boundary here, or like emotionally supporting them making decisions in their friendships and how they spend their time, and different things like that. And that is so powerful because even as adults we need that.
Yeah,
right? And
really good.
even as people that I know that were trafficked in college, it's because they didn't have a lot of autonomy of choice, and they
Yeah.
didn't have those safe adults that they could process situations with to go, hey, this is what I'm thinking about this. Can I bounce this off of you? Or those types of things are very important, even if you're not mom, but you are aunt, uncle, cousins, friends, sometimes even an older coworker now, it seems like, because so many jobs are intergenerational.
Mhm.
Um, that's a good way to, you know, let people share from their life experience, and it also helps them to develop their own kind of pearls of wisdom.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Taylor. I really appreciate you coming on with us today.
Thank you guys for having me. If you have any questions or, if we need to do this again, absolutely reach out. And yeah, I'm sorry about the sound. I know there's a tropical storm happening in our area, so I hope that did not throw anything off. But I look forward to seeing you guys continue to have these conversations and do your work in advocating for these people.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
All right. Zona, is that better? I think maybe there could have been some sound coming from her speaker that was bouncing back.
It
Does
might
that
be
sound any better to you?
a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Are you ready for your presentation?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, well, I worked on a little bit
Okay.
on because I became aware that the FBI actually put out a warning about sextortion, and I'm like, well, it's got to be getting pretty bad if the FBI is coming out with official warnings for for this. So, um, and as everything with the internet, it seems things are evolving, things
Mhm.
are changing, and we just have to keep talking about it and keep educating. And we're gonna. It's too late to nip it in the bud, but it could nip it in the bud of lives that we know,
Yeah.
right? And we can work together to put an end to this. So I just went ahead and made kind of some slides that are from an article I was reading about this, and I'm just gonna probably throw it up there because some people learn better from reading.
Yes. Or the combination of
Yeah,
reading and hearing it at the
listening and
same
reading.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay. Do you want to stay up, or I'll let
Oh,
you
I
decide
can,
what you
yeah,
want
I'll
to do?
let you.
Okay. So, um, like I said, this is from an article, and I'll put the link. But I'm pretty much just gonna be doing this. Oh, here we go. Sextortion, a growing threat preying upon our nation's teens. The FBI is warning parents, educators, caregivers, and children about sextortion, which is a crime that involves the solicitation and enticement of a minor to engage in sexual acts that are photographed or filmed and provided to an offender they have met online. So this could be anybody a child has met online. And again, it doesn't have to be children, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about protecting the children in our lives and in our communities. So the general definition of sextortion is it's used to describe a crime in which an offender coerces a minor to create and send a sexually explicit images or video. After receiving this content from the child, the offender threatens to release the compromising material unless the victim produces additional explicit material. In these cases, the offenders are motivated by the sexual gratification they receive from the content. So this is kind of the original definition. It has evolved into financially motivated sextortion, or this is like a secondary form of sextortion, which follows a similar pattern to original sextortion with a different goal. So after receiving the explicit material, the offender threatens to release the compromising material unless the victim provides payment like gift cards, mobile payment services, wire transfers, or cryptocurrency. In these cases, the offenders are primarily motivated by financial gain and not solely sexual gratification. Um, just from a personal understanding of my own, this also happens to adults with catfishing type situations. So this is kind of just really focused on children and teens. The offenders who engage in financially motivated sextortion are often located outside the United States, which I imagine is an issue that the FBI are coming up against because they're over things that happen within the United States. So obviously they're having to work together with some other law enforcement agencies to prosecute these cases. These are primarily in West African countries like Nigeria and the Ivory Coast, or Southeast Asian countries like the Philippines. The victims they target are often males between the ages of 14 and 17, but any child can become a victim. Side note, I recently read some news stories that this is a new form of labor trafficking in which they're setting up these kind of organized groups and forcing people to do this kind of sextortion. So these are the ones that are communicating with the children. And I just think that's super disturbing, where we have labor trafficking on one side and sex trafficking on the other side. But that could be another conversation. So the FBI warning is that these crimes can lead victims to self-harm and has led to suicide. From October 2021 to March 2023, the FBI and Homeland Security investigations received over 13,000 reports of online financial sextortion of minors. That's over a 20% increase for the same time period the years before. The sextortion also involves at least 12,600 victims, primarily boys, and led to at least 20 suicides. Now, these stories are what led me to have furthering conversations with my own children, which we talked about a little bit last year during the Safe and Sound Challenge, where I'm like, we've talked about this stuff. We've talked about online safety. We've talked about communications with iffy people online and stuff. But when you're talking about kids that are from good families that have had these conversations that don't have any of the previous vulnerabilities that we talk about in these conversations, that are ending up committing suicide because of this crime, we need to have more conversations. For reporting, if you or someone you know believes that they are a victim of sextortion, that means you're talking about this, immediately report the activity to law enforcement. You can report it to the FBI by calling 1-800-CALL-FBI or visit tips.fbi.gov. All right, so teenagers, you can self-report. Adults, you find out this is happening to your child, you can report it, right? This is a quote from the article from an actual FBI agent. "We urge victims to preserve all evidence and seek help quickly. Don't delete any communication, even if it's embarrassing. We protect and support victims of sextortion, ensuring they are connected to the resources they need to recover. They're going to make sure you get the help you need." And just like Taylor was talking about, our resources, we're gonna sit with you in the emotions to process this as well. For more information on sextortion and financial sextortion, visit the FBI's resources on the threats at fbi.gov/sextortion and fbi.gov/financial sextortion. I looked a little bit at these. It's good resources. So parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, youth workers, you can get on this. You can learn more about having these conversations with the kids in your life. What caregivers need to know, right? So we want to know, why would any child or teen agree to do such a thing? Why would they take pictures and get hooked into one of these relationships? Well, these individuals carrying out this crime are skilled and they're ruthless. They're smart, they're tech savvy. Like Taylor said, it is very difficult to prosecute because they have backdoor access. They have all these different IP addresses that they kind of loop through. So it is difficult. They are smart. The entry point to a young person can be any number of mobile or online sites, applications, or games. The approach to the child may come as compliments or the pretense of a romantic relationship, which, let's face it, people want to be loved. They want to be valued. They want to be complimented. This is something we all have a drive for as humans, right? So these are natural needs that people have. And these perpetrators know how to tap into that. So the key is having these conversations about the dangers ahead of time. Parents want to know, but they think my child will never do that, right? The FBI, they've interviewed victims as young as 8, and the crime affects children of both genders and crosses all ethnic and socioeconomic groups. The victims are honor roll students, the children of teachers, student athletes, etc. The only common trait among the victims is internet access. So don't think that your children would never do that. They will absolutely do this. But why don't the victims tell someone or ask for help? Because children are afraid. They're afraid of the repercussions that have been threatened to them by the criminal and afraid they will be in trouble with their parents, guardians, and law enforcement. This is natural fears. And perpetrators of this crime tap into those natural fears as well. How do I protect the young people I know? Open lines of communication are the best defense. Just like Taylor was just talking about, sideways conversations, open-ended questions. Young people need to know that this crime is happening and understand where the risks are hiding. Explain that people can pretend to be anyone or anything online, and no matter what the platform or application claims, nothing disappears online. You can live online forever. You will not be able to track down where these images go. So have these conversations early. Have these open lines of communication. Have the difficult conversations. They are the most valuable conversations to have. Also, another way to protect the young people you know, place certain limits on children's internet use. Spot check their phones and other devices to see what applications they're using and with whom they are communicating. Consider a rule against devices in bedrooms and or shut off Wi-Fi access at night. Review the privacy settings on the young person's social media accounts and phones. Go over it with them. This can be part of the conversation. Go over privacy settings and make sure their location is turned off. People don't need to know where you are all the time. How else can you protect them? Keep the door open to your children so they know they can come to you and ask for help. Let them know that the first move will always be to help, always. You are the first one that will help. If you are the adult a child trusts with this information, comfort them. Help them understand they have been a victim of a crime and help them report it to law enforcement. Let them be a part of the process. It happened to them. Sit with them in those emotions. Help them process it. Help them make the steps necessary to get justice. Be their advocate. Be their comforter. Be the one they can come to talk about any of this stuff. How to report it. All information regarding possible child sexual exploitation should be reported to the platform where it was found. You can also, as I mentioned earlier, report it to the FBI and also to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. If you feel that your child is under immediate threat, call 911. More than likely, your local law enforcement has had training and will come alongside you. And you will also, as Taylor mentioned, you can get help through DCF as well. All right, so that is the end of what I was going to talk about. So I'm
And
going to
I
remove
think
that.
that is a really good list of things that are
Yeah.
really important uh, links and some things in there that are going to be really beneficial for how you actually move forward with your children, how you talk about some of these things. So I think with what you had and the presentation before together is really lovely, building on on each other.
Yeah.
I know from my side that it is amazing to me the number of people that still don't know that trafficking exists.
Yeah.
Or I actually had a conversation yesterday with somebody who wanted me to present a case for the Medical University of South Carolina.
Hmm.
And even she said, "Oh, well, trafficking is just illegals, right?" So I know that some
Not
of these,
funny, but
it's not funny, but it's so shocking
yeah.
when you're in the work that is still, and this is a well-educated
Yeah.
doctor who is actively wanting to participate and sees this as a problem that she wants other people to be able to be educated on. So I say that to say, like, be quick to educate yourself, be quick to ask questions, be quick to do your research. It really, it matters for kids in your own life, it matters for
Mhm.
yourself, and it matters for people around you, right? Because we don't live in a vacuum. We're not completely isolated people that would no possible way ever have someone take advantage of us. And well, I wish that was the case. Realistically, because we live in the world that we live in today, it is very common that we are connected via internet, that we're connected over social media and those different types of things, and we can get desensitized even as adults to sharing our precise location, taking video of our own like front of our house and backgrounds and layouts and really private information. And while sometimes like we can make that decision for ourselves, when we also have children online and they're watching how we post
Mm.
and how we interact online, and information that we put in groups and in different settings and those things, they are seeing that connection. They are deciding for themselves what their online presence is going to look like,
Mm.
oftentimes based off of what we see and what we expect and what we model for them. So, um, yeah, even talking to your kids about posting later
Yeah.
and, not having logos and things. Anyway, so all of that is very good, but I really wanted to talk about um, kind of a new trend that I'm seeing that is very interesting as far as it ties into recovery and how traffickers are using um, drugging in order to be able to exploit people that they know in person, and that can be peers, that can be friends, that can be um, people that should be safe people in the child's lives, coaches, teachers, that sort of thing. And a lot of times, the way that this is happening is it's being presented very innocently as like, oh, headache medicine or allergy medicine or things that seem legit. And teaching your kids to question. Even I know it sounds so crazy because we think of this as like safety when you're out as an adult, maybe in an adult setting like a bar, right?
Mhm.
But not accepting open drinks from strangers, not having your kids share drinks with even friends, because it is more common now for people to have things in their drink or things like that than what you would even believe. So I say that on one side, and that you know even fake pills are being pressed to look like real prescriptions and real things. And what is so scary about that, from that's different from when I was a kid from till now, is that before you could Google and say, what's on the side of this medication, and it would tell you right on Google what the actual thing is supposed to look like, so you could confirm and go, oh, this isn't a real pill because it doesn't look like that. Well, now they have forms and things that they can press, even
Ugh.
fentanyl, even some of these other things. And honest to goodness, they can even put things in vapes. So, I mean, I, the youngest known overdose on a vape, I think the child was 8 years old.
What the heck?
Um, I couldn't imagine having access to the money to pay for a vape
Okay, but
at eight
they
years
could
old.
have picked it up from a parent or an older sibling or
Yep. Or a friend or whatever. And
yeah,
a lot of them now are flavored in candy flavored things, all this
yeah,
stuff. But what we're finding though is that kids are getting into addiction very early
yeah,
because they aren't seeing vapes as something that are dangerous.
right.
They aren't seeing them but they do have an alcohol element. So what they do is they distill the nicotine down to an alcohol vapor.
Mhm,
And that means that it is putting alcohol into their system. It is putting nicotine into their system. And
mhm.
what that does is it rewires the brain toward that dopamine, which
Uh,
makes them more susceptible in the future. So the earlier they get their hands on those things, the more susceptible they are to addiction and or exploitation, right? Uh,
Interesting.
in their future. So I say that to say, um, talk to your kids very early
Yeah,
about vaping. It is not the same as a kid picking up a cigarette when, they're 12 or 15 or 18 or whatever, and having those conversations with them about like the things that they're putting into their body,
yeah,
taking medications as prescribed, not overdoing it even on over the counter medicines like
yeah.
ibuprofen, Tylenols, things like that, because it it just messes with so many systems. So I say that because there are a lot of people now that we're finding are coming out of trafficking, that their way that they got into trafficking was through somebody that they trusted giving them something for the first time. And they are not necessarily bad kids. These are star athletes. These are straight A students. These are kids that want to perform and do really well. They
Mhm.
have great desire and great drive to be
Yes.
successful individuals, to be well connected to their communities, to be, high achievers and high performers. So it's not just kids that are sad or depressed or don't have friends or different things like that, right? So I just
Mhm.
want to kind of dispel a little bit of that, because even if you have a child who is a high performer or a perfectionist, they might still struggle with self-esteem issues.
Oh, yeah, and I think, sometimes they're supposed to be something that helps them perform better, like
Mhm.
more energy and more focus and, something like that. So if they have that pressure, even if it's self-pressure, if they
Mhm.
have that drive, yeah, they could be looking for something that gives them an edge.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so when you're having conversations with your kids, letting them know, like, even the difference between them trying a vape and getting hooked on a vape at the age of 8 to the age of 15 is the difference between like 50% less likely to form a major addiction in their future
Wow.
life. So when we're talking about this stuff, like, it matters. Like, like, I don't know if you know that that's one of the reasons why the alcohol age is supposed to be 21 in the United States, is because after the age of 21, if that's the first time you pick up alcohol, your likelihood of picking up an addiction in your life that is debilitating or destructive, right? It lowers, I think, to less than 1%.
Oh, wow.
So,
Interesting.
even those types of things and those types of behaviors can be really important, because we
Mhm.
have more kids than ever that are being diagnosed with ADHD, which
Yeah.
puts their oftentimes dopamine drive into overdrive, and then feeling like they have sometimes something wrong with them. I don't think there's anything wrong with anybody that has
Oh,
ADHD, for clarification.
it's just a
Um,
different way of thinking.
yeah, it's a different way of thinking, but a lot of times they can feel the pressure or the need to try something that will make them focus, or to high perform even at a different level, or to
Mhm.
kind of quote beat the competition, or to go that extra mile, right?
Mm.
It is perfectly normal and acceptable to teach your kids to not only have boundaries but to have margin,
Yeah, that's good.
and to rest when their body needs to rest,
Yes.
and teaching your so basically what I would like to talk about today is, when you are teaching your child all of these different things, right? One of the ways that you can help them not avoid those red flags is by having the margin in their life to be able to
I'm good.
process and
Sorry,
to
Zona.
reflect.
I'm just gonna tip out and just give you the floor. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So giving them the option and the opportunity to have margin and to reflect on their life and on the things that are happening. Sometimes we can get into a situation, and I'm sure every one of us have had this come up, where at first we were like, oh, this is going to be great, or I'm okay with this, or we kind of go along with a group of people or with friends or things like that, and we go, it's not that bad. But then on reflection later, we go, you know what, I really didn't like that, or that really wasn't good for me, or I don't think that that went like I wanted it to. But in order to have that kind of reflection, or that kind of ability to take that time, you have to have margin in your life, and kind of giving your kids space to check in with themselves, and modeling checking in with themselves. Like, how did your body feel in that situation? Were you experiencing anxiety? Did you feel pressure to uh continue to talk about a subject you're not comfortable about? How did you how does that make you feel mentally? Like, do you feel energized? Is this something that you feel is helping you to build the kinds of connections that you want? Because a lot of times we will assume that everyone else is okay with a situation, and that must mean that we should feel okay in a situation. And without having that margin to kind of reflect, and a safe adult to reflect that with, that will not be reactive or punishment in that time frame, is really, really important, because we have a lot of things that kids are having to process that adults are also processing for the first time, that are new, that we didn't even know when I was a kid were going to be something that we'd have to address, such as artificial intelligence, way more access to technology, way more screen time. There's this huge propensity toward like dopamine inducing activities, even online, and teaching your kids to have that margin and that space, and modeling having margin and space, and even saying, it's okay to have, access and connection online, but at least this percentage, even 10% of your interactions should be focused toward people in person, whether that's, family dinner night, whether that is a uh, religious activity together, whether that is a sport activity together, whether that is, I don't know, a gaming activity together where you're in the same room over a board game, a card game, something like that, because there are different ways of interacting when you're face to face. And sometimes when things are online, it can go really fast paced, and it'll go beyond the boundaries that you have in your head, in your heart, that you have intended. And it seems to happen so quickly that without that margin to really go back and reflect and go, is this how I would like things to go? And to be able to teach your kids how to talk about maybe walking back some of those things or some of those choices. So I say that to say, um, even being able to say, hey, I know that I was willing to do this last time, but I don't really want to do that again. That's not something I'm interested in anymore. Giving your kids the language to change their mind or to change their boundary, and the confidence that it is okay to change their boundary or to decide that that's no longer something that is going to work for them, really goes a long way, because that way there isn't this like, oh, well, now that it's happened one time, that always has to be the norm. We want that, not just in, internet safety, in sexual safety, in friendship safety, in family member safety, in all of those things. And that could be something as little as, you know, they always give this one person a hug and they decide they don't want to do that anymore. Give them permission to kind of walk back that boundary and to say, I'm just not interested in that anymore. But, thank you. Thank you for offering that, and having that connection and that strength, to be able to speak up for themselves. It takes a lot of practice to be able to advocate for yourself and your needs. And the safest people to do that with are your parents, your caregivers, your siblings. So when kids are saying, you know, I feel unsafe, I'm not okay, that sort of thing, it's really important to take notice of that and to not dismiss those feelings, because you don't want them shutting down those feelings in future situations where it really might be somebody who doesn't have their best interest at heart. And when you teach your kids to be people pleasers or to automatically go along to get along, or to brush things under the carpet, that sort of idea, you are teaching your kids to ignore their own warning signals in order to address trafficking and exploitation, or even having the idea that, hey, this isn't right and I should tell somebody, or I should talk about this, or I should have, a conversation because I don't feel good about this thing. So I know that my what I'm sharing is a little bit shorter, but really wanted to kind of throw that out there because there are so many things that are coming up for kids that were never even an issue. Like when I was a kid, there was no idea that people could overdose on nicotine. The whole idea of that was absolutely crazy to me. So now, with some of those things being introduced so young, and lots of things trying to make your child older, faster, and willing to do more things at younger and younger ages. We say, teach them how to walk back a boundary, or to decide that they no longer want to do something, or that that's not something that they're going to be doing in the future. That just because something happened one time, they don't have to maintain that standard or those behaviors, that activity, any of those things. Those things can still be walked back. And what it looks like to get help from a safe and trusted adult if they need to. So, yeah. Well, guys, I am so grateful that you took time on your Saturday to join us and to really dig in to the Safe and Sound Challenge. We've had a lot of tips and tricks, a lot of things that you can apply to your life, to your safety online and in person. And we are so grateful that we have had our two speakers from One More Child and Dixie being able to share, and you guys being able to hear some of these new things that I am dealing with as I share from my experiences and what I'm seeing in the world. So thank you guys so much for your time, and for spending your Saturday with us.
Yes, thank you, Zona, for sharing some of that stuff. I know with your work now, you're getting a lot of hands-on interactions with what's happening now, and some of the red flags to look for, and some of the things that we need to have more sideways conversations about.
Yes.
It's hard to keep track of everything, but that's why we keep educating and keep sounding the alarm on these things. It's an evolving crime, and it's an evolving society, and so like Taylor mentioned, like any gathering creates a culture, and so we are trying to create a culture of freedom and openness and hopefully safety for our children. So
Yeah.
let's work together to create a safe culture for our kids to grow up in, and for their children as well. So
Yes.
thanks for sharing, Zona, and thank you, Robbie and Taylor, for joining us this weekend.
Yeah.
And this we'll keep this up for you guys for at least a week. So
Mhm. Yep.
have a great weekend.
Bye, guys. Thank you.